Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're having a wonderful Oxford Real Farming Conference experience. I'm Tiffani Patton, co-director at Real Food Media, where we collaboratively create movement-building communication strategies and media for liberation, justice, and joy in the food system. I'm going to facilitate a discussion with Peleke Flores and Wassilie until the end of the hour. And then we're going to open it up to audience Q&A. So as we're talking, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. And Carla from Oxford Real Farming Conference will be keeping track of them so we can answer them later. So a little bit about our great panelists. Carl was born and raised in Alaska, rooted deep in salmon culture and salmon communities. His Yupik name is Angutak, and he has both feet in the Yupik and Western world views as a Yupik biologist. Since the devastating 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill, Carl has been working on defending salmon ecosystems and the communities and relations on Mother Earth that depend on them. Peleke Flores was born in Hawaii and raised in Kauai. He has dedicated over 20 years of his career working and volunteering for Aina-based nonprofit organizations and family farms. Peleke has spent the past decade restoring traditional fish ponds, which we'll learn more about today. I'm really excited to be here in conversation with them, with Carl and Peleke, two people who work in different ways to preserve their cultures. On a call last year, Peleke asked me why the oceans no longer bubble with schools of fish. And at the time, I quickly spotted off what I thought were the main culprits, like pollution, from oil spills to garbage to agricultural runoff, rising temperatures and overfishing. And we'll talk about those culprits today. But we're also going to talk about the work people are doing to advocate for clean water, to preserve their cultures, and restore waterways so that they are bubbling with life once again. So yeah, now we're going to get into the discussion. And first, I want to ask you both. So you both come from cultures that have a specific fish as its cornerstone. Peleke, can you tell me about your culture and the importance of the mullet fish to it? Peleke, you're still on mute.
Sorry, I was bouncing in and out. Things froze for a bit. What was?
Oh yeah, if you can tell me about the importance of the mullet fish to your culture, and how it is a cornerstone species.
For hello, everybody. Peleke Flores here. Yeah, first for mullet, Hawaiian striped mullet. We call ama is a size variety, and then anai is their biggest size. But versus within our fish pond realm, it's been one of the most popular, I guess, fish growing within the fish pond. We definitely had some of our ali'is and I guess historians kind of match the downfall of our mullets to the downfall of our people. And that was kind of when it's going through and it's seeing the shift in times and our society's been rolling out, which we also did that with our kalo too, our taro, seeing that we call it haloa, that everlasting breath. Same thing with our mullets. That ama or another way for ama that shining. But it's definitely been a cornerstone of finding balance within the fish pond, within our outer shorelines, to feed those outer shorelines, to feed the people. And yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. And Carl, we had talked about salmon before, and so I'd love to, if you could explain to us a little bit about the importance of salmon to your culture and why it's so sacred.
Chamai, my name is Angutak. Carl Wassilie is my Western name. Just to give a reference to those salmon cultures and salmon peoples are circumpolar. there's been a lot of destruction over the past 300-400 years, from the Black Sea, Mediterranean, Atlantic, Pacific, Barents. I can keep going on and on. There is, but we're circumpolar peoples. Yupik, and I identify with the Inuit as well, and then also as salmon peoples extended throughout the North Pacific, and that's where I'm from. Is the Bering Sea watersheds on the Alaska side, so that would be the former U.S. territory, now a state in Alaska. And then we have relatives in Siberia, and the other side of the Bering Sea, so we have similar cultures, and salmon is central to our peoples. It's been a part of our spiritual, cultural, nutritional, and actually even just our cultural survival, but our psychological, our art, or everything about our cosmology is also connected to salmon. And as a sacred salmon, we recognize that yes, they are sacred. In general, the salmon. There's multiple species of salmon, and they've been the keystone of our lives and our family, and for celebrating, especially in these types of months where we have a cold, frozen landscape, and the fish that we catch through the summer and fall provide for these celebrations, and from a Yupik perspective, some of the colonial religious celebrations have been incorporated into our traditional ways of knowing, for a number of factors I won't get into, but we still have a strong relationship and with our environment. And the salmon are really important because they go from the sacrifice that the highest rivers, the mountains, and put their eggs into the earth where the water runs, and then as you get the freezing of where I'm from, you get this freezing of the rivers up at the top all the way down to the sea, and in the springtime and in the summer when we call it makiak, when the earth floods, it also means makiak. We do sweat. When we do a sweat, it's the same thing. It's this purification. So and that's when the salmon come down also. So the salmon go out to the sea or to a watershed, and they go. Some of them go out for a few years, and some go out for half a decade. Some go out for 7 years, and there's different salmon species, that salmonoids and whatnot, that are interconnected, but they're Sedna, the sacred Sedna, the sacred woman, sacred goddess of the sea, is really important in our cosmology too, because that's also where Sedna is in relation to the spirit world. And so so we have to really honor and respect all the animals, especially sea mammals. So I'm a traditional fisherman, hunter, and including a gatherer from like berries, and these are all possible because of salmon. Actually, salmon are the keystone species for the entire ecosystem of the watersheds and the circumpolarly. So that's a big part of the restoration that's happening with tribes and First Nations in the Turtle Island, North America, and we're seeing that the impacts of climate change that are really and overfishing, and of course technological disasters by human beings with the industrialization following the melting sea ice. So I'll keep the threats to a minimum. But that's I come from the salmon people. We have relations. The salmon, and there's a few left in the Mediterranean, I believe. I know there's some in the northern parts of Europe, and there's restoration happening in the West Atlantic and on Turtle Island and in Pacific, uh, and including south northeast Asia and whatnot. So
Mhm.
that's my relation, all my relations, so and including the birds and wildlife and migratory animals.
Yeah, thank you. Peleke, so you've been working on restoring fish ponds for a while now. Can you tell us more about the fish ponds in Hawaii, like the history, and why they need so much restoration today?
Is it still there? Okay. Sorry, froze again. Okay. Sorry, I lost you at history, but I was just start off. You said just explaining fish ponds in Hawaii. So for us, we have um, land divisions called Ahupua'a systems, or divisions of land from the mountain to the sea, kind of more generally a pie shape, but not always. But basically, you take care of all your resources from the top of the mountain down into the sea within your boundary. So if you live in your Ahupua'a, you don't go into others. You should have enough resources within your Ahupua'a to live off of. You don't have something in your Ahupua'a that somebody else's has, then that's where you start trading. Um, but within the Ahupua'a system, there are fish ponds. For Hawaii, we have 6 different styles, possibly 7 different styles of fish ponds, ranging from up in the mountain down into the ocean. Depends where the water source is. If we break those 7 different styles down, it'll be you kind of categorize it through its salinity. We start off with the 3 different types of salinity. It's either gonna be fully fresh, brackish, or salt water. Once you understand your salinity, you, you're gonna be able to understand its function. So you get 3 different types of functions. There's fish traps, fish pens, and fish ponds. Um, the fish traps are basically what it's called. It traps fish when you need it, and you have to check it every time, or else your fish will um, spoil. And you only put it in when you need it. Fish pens are basically temporary holding pens. It's enough to keep fish alive for X amount of time, like a live ice box. Um, we share with our students. They come down, our community comes down. That an example is back in the day when we know a chief is coming or chiefess is coming, um, and we know what's their favorite fish, we would go and catch it and hold it in the pen for the time being, so that when they come, earn that extra brownie points, you got their favorite fish instead of taking your chance when they arrive and trying to catch their favorite fish at the time, and you fall short. But those are one of the uses for the fish pens. And then fish ponds would be considered the higher technology of the three, which it can make its own food and recruit its own fish within the system. All you do is maintain the walls and the resources needed within the pond in order for the pond to keep doing what basically Mother Nature is doing, but in a little amplified more section. Um, so once you understand your salinity, if you have more fresh or more salty water, most likely it's going to be a trap or a pen. If you have the brackish water, that is like the most productive of the salinities. That brackish water, we call it. Um, well, you have different types. You get the brackish water, that's just that mixture. When you dive in underneath, it looks like a heat wave, like on the road, kind of blurry. But when it's in the right space and water slows down, you got the right nutrients, and you have a bloom. It's called that. We call it Vaimomona. That's how we connected with Carlo the last time. We translate Vaimomona into sweet waters. That's the basic foundation of our food chain with the sweet waters. You got that, then you got a more productive um, water, quality system. which would lead you to a fish pond. Yeah, you can't have a fish pond without the brackish water. If not, you'll either have a pen or a trap. And then from there, you put it within the 7 styles of fish ponds based on the land. And then there's all different types. We call it local i'a, fish ponds in Hawaii. Local is like that body of water, a body of aquaculture. And i'a is kind of plainly defined as fish, but for us, i'a is anything that grows in the water. Any fish, turtle, shrimp, shark, whale, like those are all considered within the i'a realm. Even our taro, we plant taro in the water, and that plant is considered an i'a. So anything that grows within the water. So our local i'a is why it expands, but throughout all our stories and different ponds throughout the island, that's how the mullet is the most consistent fish talked about within the stories. But there's definitely a lot of other fishes that grow better in certain places, depends where they're at and what kind of salinity they have. So we're in the renaissance of restoring our fish ponds. We lost almost all of them at one time due to water diversions and development and our people dying off. And, mismanagement of resources. But right now we're currently in a group called Hui Malamalukui'a, a group that takes care and trying to saving fish ponds, and we got about 50 fish ponds represented throughout the island chain. There were surveys done before saying at one point when I first started with fish ponds, it was 288 fish ponds were surveyed throughout all the islands that have the potential of being restored. Most recently, between the past year, there's another survey that said 488. Personally, I believe we had over thousands. Not every fish pond within the whole island realm got documented. A lot got destroyed before it got documented, but it's all good. We'll take the lowest number, the 288, and we start expanding to show the potential of what fish ponds can do, especially helping solve like wild fish population decreasing. And that's one what's they called scenario we've been bringing up is like looking at all the negative factors that have been hitting the wild fish population. But a piece of that puzzle is kind of looking at how fish ponds affected that too, and looking within the past 50 years, and we're looking at overfishing, pollution, global warming, sea level rise and stuff. But within 150 years, nobody is looking at our fish pond as incubators and how the incubators help fruit photo send out food for the wild fish population to bring them closer to shore. Talking with NOAA and DAR, Department of Aquatic Resources, and looking at their data that they've been putting out, trying to stop fishing in certain places so that they can expand the population again. But when we started to break down the stories and the data they're using, like they're kind of using our old stories of how the places used to bubble, but saying that that's Mother Nature's count when technically it's not really. It was the fish pond that expanded Mother Nature's count and bloomed up more. So when we say 288 incubators fell off the face of the earth within 150 years at our low number, we can kind of match that decrease going down because nothing's feeding the pile. And what we see now could be closer to Mother Nature's count of what's happening naturally versus what's happening through an amplified system. But in a nutshell, I don't want to take up too much time. Yeah.
Well, thank you. So Carl, earlier you were talking a little bit about some of the threats to salmon species, but if you could go into a little bit more detail about what and who are the biggest threats to salmon and like the lifestyles and of people who are living off of salmon.
Yeah. There's been multiple crashes in the Bering Sea, but there's also an increase in industrial. We call them factory trawlers, mega factory trawlers. They've been they target specific species of fish, but their bycatch sometimes in a single net may be 80%, and that 80% bycatch, which they just throw overboard, and usually it's dead by the time they bring it in. And these include salmon, marine mammals, and if they're doing even midshore, go hitting the bottom. So they'll be bringing up corals and basically clear cutting the ocean bottom forest, which provides for the security of our young salmonoids as they go out to the sea. They need these forests to be able to survive from the predators. There's a relationship there that's really important. So that's the habitat destruction by the industrial trawler fleets is probably number one. Then climate change has just increased that threat by the trawlers, as well as the marine traffic and movement of especially movement of large-scale military industrial complex in the Arctic is a potential threat based on what we're seeing with the increase in traffic, as also illegal fishing in the moving up in the northern Bering Sea, and then in the Bering Sea is one of the most rapidly warming marine bodies in the planet, along with Alaska and Siberia being extraordinarily hot. There is global warming, and it's amplified in the Bering Sea and the Arctic. And I just wanted to also, there's also manipulation happening by big corporations from the United Nations to domestic and international policy regarding aquaculture, and these companies creating genetically modified fish, frankenfish, and they're taken away from the reality of what is a salmon. And so they're even though they're using salmon genes, they're not salmon. They're not even created from the ocean. They're created in a lab, and then they're brought up in a warehouse. So these are like caged animal feeding operations on land, and they're actually, we've already with the Block Corporate Salmon campaign, we've been able, with some of our allies and whistleblowers, we've been able to identify that they're actually polluting, and they're creating they're taking massive amounts of water, and this is just for warehoused salmon. They said they're going to have 100% recycled water, but they're not doing it. It's 99% waste. They might be recycling some of it for a certain amount of time, but then it gets so toxic that they have to release it. So they're releasing toxic water. They take this great aquifer water at huge amounts and per day, and this is just for a small amount of proteins, technically, a small amount of nutrition. So, and then the just the spiritual, the ethical and spiritual implications of blaming the lack of fish and blaming fishermen, that we can stop fishing if we, and I mean, if we go toward these genetically modified and pin fish farms. So these pin farms are like another threat in the Pacific Northwest, and also in other places in the world. There's including the Atlantic. What's happening there from a Western perspective is there's massive amounts of uses of different hormone altering chemicals, with antibiotics, and also just the pellets that they're used sometimes are toxic, full of pesticides, and so we're really, it's not sustainable, and they're destroying our wetlands and our watersheds. And so the combination of habitat destruction by mining activities, and where the salmon are most vulnerable in the headwaters of these places, as well as along the watershed, are also major threats. But the Block Corporate Salmon campaign, we're working globally because they're planning on expanding this aqua advantage salmon around the world as a solution for hunger. and a decline in biodiversity. And it actually just accelerates the problems we already have in an industrial scale. So Black Corporate Salmon Campaign, we're working on protecting indigenous ways of being and restoration of the salmon for the betterment of not only the ecosystem but all the peoples, and the restoration of the health of the peoples in relations and our relations. So our relationship to the ecosystem that the salmon provide, and that provide more food with bears dragging salmon out into the forest. So we have entire forests that have the DNA of salmon. I have salmon DNA in me. There's salmon DNA in the berries and then the birds anyways, their salmon are essential for a live, healthy ecosystem. So on a circumsolar scale, that's the best methodology for restoring a healthy watershed, is breaking down these dams. There's thousands of dams on salmon watersheds that are built just over the last 70 years that really are also a major threat. So with the collapse of certain species, some are still providing sustenance, but we from a Yupik perspective, we've had massive collapse of our keystone subsistence species that provide life. While these trawlers are still continuing to do bycatch, and then these companies like Aqua Bounty are going around touting how they got a solution for hunger and displacing even small scale fisher folks that are doing sustainable salmon fishing in the local market, to provide food that's affordable and healthy and whatnot. And so this warehouse salmon and pin salmon is a bad idea for the ecosystem and our peoples.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's a threat on the level of genocide. Yeah.
That number, that figure that you gave of 80% from the trawlers being bycatch is astonishing and just terrible.
Yeah, and that's just the extreme example.
On the high end, but still. Yeah. And also I've been following the work of Black Corporate Salmon for a while, and I'm just really appreciative of that work that everyone who's involved in that campaign has been doing. And we just dropped a link to that in the chat. But you mentioned something. You mentioned as one of the threats, just the military-industrial complex, Carl. And also, I know Peleke in Hawaii. Obviously, the military has a huge impact as well. Can you share a little bit about some of the impacts that it's had on the environment there, environment and society? Yeah.
Oh, it's definitely been a whole lot since the overthrow, I guess. But overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom. But at least the most recent one right now that's been hitting the news is the Navy's gas tanks on Red Hill on the island of Oahu. Been leaking for I don't know how much years, very long years, maybe almost 100. Not too short, maybe not even 100, but basically it is huge, a lot of huge tanks and a lot of millions of gallons of jet fuel leaked into our freshwater aquifer in the ground. So that was coming up out of people's faucets and showers and water hoses, and people been getting sick left and right within the whole section wherever that aquifer comes out from to feed the cities. I don't know all the numbers. It's on another island, but that's been one of our biggest ones. And water for us in this little rock in the middle of the whole Pacific Ocean, pretty secluded. That is like everybody else around our precious resource, and that is the start of our fisheries too. We need that fresh water to reach that salt water to start growing things more consistently, I guess. And then on our island, we have the PMRF missile range, the Pacific Missile Range, guys, and they're doing all kind of radar stuff so in the oceans and um, from the land and missile launches and stuff. So I do that part, and then on the other two islands, they're still doing live firing ranges and blowing up parts of our lands. And yeah, so it's been a consistent battle. They used to do that to one of our little islands, Kaho'olawe, and there was a good fight back then. And a lot of our um, Hawaiian leaders, occupied the land and just snuck onto the land and just kept um, trying to save Kaho'olawe, and it worked. They stopped the Navy from bombing that land. They damaged it a whole lot, blew up that aquifer there, which was really small to begin with. But that was the only one had. Um, and there's still a lot of UXOs around, unexploded organisms on that island. We've been doing community restoration, trying to replant um, vegetation on that island. But yeah, you need a specialist with you so that if you come across a bomb, you're not getting blown up or digging a hole and yeah, being your last hole you dig. Um, so yeah, military has done its share of parts here on our islands, and we're trying to play in different ways, trying to fight it. Um, yeah, hope that answers the question.
Yeah. And then another threat to just the environment, the ecosystems there is the large agrochemical companies like Monsanto and Dow, who about 20 years ago really like set up shop on the islands to develop and test genetically engineered crops to be grown with a bunch of different toxic chemical compounds. And I know that the surrounding communities and environments were really devastated by the negative impacts of the toxins sprayed into the air and like running through the water. So can you tell us a little bit about the agricultural runoff situation in Hawaii and some of the other instances where maybe corporate or like military interests have taken priority over community health? And then also what people have been doing in response?
Yep. When you're talking about Monsanto, Dow, Syngenta, I've been on the west side of our island, just learning about it. We didn't realize we were one of the largest chemical company, use agro fields on our island on Kauai. Um, yeah, got so bad that they're spraying pesticides and herbicides, and it was getting into our schools. That was just yards away, and children and teachers choking and coughing and having to get sent to the emergency room and stuff. And yeah, so there has been some, I guess, laws passed. I haven't been directly on those as much as some of my friends that was right in the front line, but apparently they moved it a couple hundred more feet away from the school as no spray zones, which is still not, like, not the best thing still yet. Um, the companies have not fully shut down, but there's a lot of fallow fields that cannot be used because of whatever contaminants is in the ground, and remediation have to be doing so with another nonprofit I'm involved in. We're trying to see how we can at least start using those spaces, which the one big area where they are using traditionally, literally over 100 years ago, it was still a traditional fish pond, a really big one. Like, might have been the biggest one on our island, um, just about 1,000 acres. So it's like they're still pushing to divert water out of it so that they can use it, and the military base is right there. So there's a lot of inner things happening there with the egg getting water to the base, and but it's not said out loud. But when you start looking at the fine print or just the movement of how everything's going, you can see those setups to make sure entities in those spaces are still running and receiving their whatever they need. But it's all up to us too, as the people to like stand up and start doing stuff to help take those spaces back. And yeah, been a one step at a time kind of thing. But at least we do mahalo or thank the guys who were paying attention more and looking at not just the physical things happening on the ground health wise and with the land and the water, but also in the political system and following what's been being pushed through the ledge and everything else. And for me personally, I was pushing that on the side. Like, I didn't vote. I still grumbled. Like, not paying attention to the politics side, and started to realize more. We were like, no, we're not part of America. We shouldn't be voting. This is the Hawaiian Kingdom's yet. But we still started to learn how much that is turning around and biting us in the butt and continuing this cycle that, our parents, grandparents' times started to fail and keep doing that route. So we got to jump in the system. We got to take a hold, jump in that lion's den, and just start working it. If not, we're all going to die off, and our kids won't get it any easier. So trying to do my part, learn about the political system. I voted twice already, so it's like, okay. And then attending meetings, planning meetings, and it's a lot, but yeah, I can't just stick on the land. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I was saying there's multiple fronts for that struggle, and you're taking on many of them. Carl, can you tell us a little bit about the Aqua Act, which is advancing the quality and understanding of American aquaculture, and some of its implications?
Well, yeah, I can. I want to put things in perspective because, first of all, indigenous peoples throughout the entire world have used aquaculture, and it's and some cultures have, like we're talking right now, have actually improved the ecosystem with aquaculture. So the traditional ways that have been passed down for thousands of years to have a relationship with the sacred is the important part. And that, there are movements like even in the Aqua Act. So it's but the threats are even bigger. So like the indigenous peoples where I'm at in the Salish Sea, I mean, they actually had built walls for clam beds so that the sediment would run off and create clam beds, right? So there's ways in Alaska where we have fish wheels in the rivers that minimize the amount of fish, so you're not putting a net across the entire river. And then we have set nets from out in the wide riverbanks and whatnot. We set a net, and you use very low energy. Traditionally, we drift with the set net on shore and drift down and catch salmon without any energy. So there's sustainable ways of that indigenous peoples have in aquaculture, and we're being left behind in the Aqua Act, for example. But we do have to recognize the colonial forces. Hawaii and Alaska are very similar because of these. We're the offspring of that first generation that were adults when statehood was created by these colonial factors, and we're both impacted by wars. The Cold War was where most of the continuing leaking that we're having in the Arctic, including the nuclear bomb testing sites and feeding Native people radioactive contamination without them knowing. So these things, we've got people overcoming these, and then part of it is the political part. But the Aqua Act is a federal act in the United States, and it's given way too much power to these colonial big biotech firms, but also for net pen operations that are contaminated or sensitive wetlands. And the important thing about wetlands and these seaweeds is that they're the most appropriate and available resources for carbon sinks to support our planet in this climate change. So if we continue to allow these corporations to create this sustainable industrial aquaculture, both on land and in the rivers and the seas and the lakes, they actually are not conducive to the community. The money is exported, and it's within the industrial food system. So the Aqua Act has some problems where they're, instead of recognizing the importance of local food systems and local knowledge and place-based systems for providing for a healthy economy and a healthy peoples, and doing that, replicating that along all rivers and waters to restore our ecosystems so that we actually have carbon sinks. And there's ways of knowing that can do that. So I guess, for it, the Aqua Act is somewhat complicated. I mean, there are opportunities that we're seeing up in Alaska, for example, for restoring our sovereignty on the coast. And this is happening in Prince William Sound, where the Exxon Valdez oil spill at that time was the largest technological disaster on the planet, when spilling billions of gallons along over 1,000 miles of coastline, destroying entire fisheries that are still suffering today. So what Native Conservancy is doing is they're restoring indigenous kelp farming that the herring need, because herring was the most impacted. They're critical species for the entire Pacific Northwest and Pacific Ocean. Their migratory routes are along the coastline. So it's not only fish and salmon, and it's multiple species of marine mammals, but the indigenous peoples also can get herring and herring roe sustainably. There's different techniques of aquaculture with that as well. And so now, to put it in context, there's the restoration of indigenous of the, in response to the corporatization of our coast and our wetlands. I think it's a kind of like the land back, but we want our coast back, and we can't let these corporations destroy our coast in the name of aquaculture. And that's to me is the biggest threat about the act, is that it's not giving enough power for indigenous fishermen put kelp out there, so because they're not when they're doing the kelp farming, they're not harvesting all the kelp. They're saving kelp for the future generations of the herring. So it's a combination of utilizing Western science and traditional knowledge and restoring the ecosystem, and also providing at least some nutrition from and also it can support the local small scale fisheries. Plus the kelp has been traditionally used throughout the entire Pacific Northwest. I'm guessing it's global, because kelp is an important part of the ecosystem, and that's also good food. There's thousands of species of kelp that are edible. But these also are climate carbon sinks, and including the wetlands and also for biodiversity of our wetlands. And so that's the biggest threat by the Aqua Act and the industrial aquaculture industry.
Thank you. Something that you both have talked about is sort of having these ecosystems function as they should and as they would, to create a great habitat to sort of lure the things that you want in, and so that you can steward them, lure them in, steward them, and then take from that. Peleke, and you mentioned this about the fish ponds, the one with the brackish water, how it kind of creates its own food for the fish who are in there. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that functions?
So yeah, we have fish pond, just focusing on we have here. It's 39-acre fish pond with a wall that is about 2,700 feet separated from the riverway, and then it's being fed by a freshwater source of springs and one from another separate waterfall. how it gets its freshwater and its saltwater influence, with only 2 inlets in the pond wall. So that when high tide comes, salt water only comes into the pond on the high tide, but then if the tides are low, water always is going out of the pond. Basically, most of our fish ponds, we go back a little bit, tell like when people ask like, oh, what was this place like without the fish pond walls? Like, you have a joke, say, what do you get when you put an elephant and a rhino together? The elephino. But that was like 800 years ago. Nobody really documented that good, but we know how a fish pond functions on the Waimomona, the phytoplankton, zooplankton bloom. So if we were to take away the wall, where would that space be naturally? With Mother Nature's movement. At the most top corner of our pond would be like a 1 acre, nice calm spot where the springs come down, nutrients are there, salt water, and the wind is always blowing up in that section. So I believe that bloom would have happened naturally before our ancestors started, kaliloming, like massaging the land. And so on a natural count, Mother Nature is doing a 1 acre bloom, attracting, maybe we just put in the numbers so it's easy to count, 10,000 baby fish every spawning season. And that was what Mother Nature is doing. And what our kupuna did is, we call it kilo, to observe and watch and what's things happening throughout the season. They figured out using the springs in that area to build a wall that would cut off this section from the river, slow down water even more, but still have the right amount of flow in there to expand that 1 acre of Mother Nature's bloom into 39 acres now. So just taking that same simple method that Mother Nature is doing in a smaller scale, but expanding it without really manipulating a lot of, or like doing damage to other spaces. So now from that 39 acres worth of bloom, it's just coming from the springs and slowing down more salt water from coming in and out quickly. Now we could feed, throwing another number in there, 1 million babies, filter feeders within that space. Well, just because you can attract 1 million babies within the pond doesn't mean you're going to grow 1 million fish in there. Our gates were meant to be just wide enough where babies can swim in and out freely. So they are free to go in and out as much. It'll stop big predator fish from coming in or out that is going to want to eat those babies, but they will protect the inside. But we'll cut that number in half. We'll say 500,000 gets out to the wild aquifer, while the other 500,000 stays there. But we'll go follow the ones that swam out. As those get out of the gate, now they're in wild fish territory. Now they're basically food for the omnivores, the carnivores, and everything else. And as we start looking at our fish ponds like that, because within the past 100 years, we were looking at fish ponds. It's, oh yeah, we can grow fish in there. We can go and harvest, eat the fish, and then we start feeding our village. But that's necessarily, if we look at all the math and how you do that, you won't be able to last long at that. And within the past 100 years, all that data of how much pounds per fish per acre per year you can grow and how much economic value you can get out of that was not our people's way of growing fish. That was like the plantation era, and everybody's trying to make money off of that section of stuff. And all of them failed. There may be like one more that's still in there, but they're not like intensively farming to sell. But the ones who are trying to intensively farm and keep up with the demand all failed because fish ponds weren't meant to be like that. So we're kind of switching the ball and looking at it more traditional aspect of it as an incubator more than a fish growing tank. And the goal was to get as much babies in there because you can grow the phytoplankton bloom to feed the filter feeders way faster than you can grow the seaweed that's going to feed the adults. Seaweeds can be growing on the wild outside and can keep up with the population out there. Or if you get intense amount of babies and you release that out into the ocean, now it starts feeding the omnivores and the carnivores, and now that population starts blowing up. And now it's the job for what we call the fishermen, and through those activities, or to be the netting and everything else, to help feed the people. So the goal is to get the oceans bubbling so that everybody can eat on the outside, not just how intensively we can eat from this little pond here, which 39 acres not small, but it's still compared to the island of how we're trying to feed everybody. And just having that overflow. We have a Olelo no Ea wine proverb that talk about the umeke of knowledge, the bowl of knowledge, which has different meanings, but like you never stick your hand in that bowl and take out, keep taking out, because it's never going to fill up. But if you keep putting in, whether it be the work, whether it be, anything, it'll overflow one day. And when you come up to the bowl, you never need to stick your hand in. You just have to put your hands underneath and something's going to fall out and it'll be forever feeding. But you're not just only taking, you're also giving back so that the next generation will have that overflow. And that's what it's kind of talking. And the fish pot is just one part of that whole system. We still got our limu growers. Our limu is seaweed, like I talked about the kelp. We have we have tons of different types of seaweeds, and they are in the shoreline, and they are feeding our herbivores that don't get eaten from the omnivores and carnivores, so they can live. So that there's all these different types of fish within the wild that starts matching up with our stories of the oceans bubbling with places. And when I scan YouTube, I see spaces that are like that, and the waters are rattling, and I tag that to my coworkers and friends restoring fish ponds. One day we're gonna get back to that. Like it's been in our stories. My great grandmother talked about it. She talked about her great grandfather talking about it. That was just 2 eyeballs away. I saw her, she saw him. About 150 years, not that far. We could reverse this, and we just gotta do it right, reset the foundation stones, and yeah, go at it.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I love that analogy, that metaphor about the bowl. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Carl, it looked like you wanted to say something, but if I'm wrong, I can just ask the next question. But I see your face lighting up too. Okay. So I guess.
Well, I was just going to say, I've seen that bubbling in the coast and with the herring before, and in our salmon streams. So I know I've got familiarity with it, and yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it can come back.
That's great. So for a final question, I'm wondering if we'll start with you, Carl, if you can share some of the most effective strategies you've seen or used in this work for food sovereignty and to preserve your culture and way of being and way of life.
Yeah, I would say there's no single effective strategy except for, the importance of relationality. And that is our relationship with nature, with the animals, with the with the food that we ingest, the water that we drink. So that relationality is also important to our relationships with each other. Um, we went through, I think, 350 years of peace in our traditional knowledge before colonialization. So it's a combination of there's whalers, but then the Russian fur traders, and then of course you had the Spanish coming up from the north, from the Pacific up north, and anyways, there's multiple levels of colonial activities that changed the society and the traditional ways of trading resources in a peaceful way. And restoring that would be the best strategy, because when there's war, it destroys communities, the land, and creates a. I mean, we've been talking a lot about these impacts from and its colonialization and war. So so from a human perspective, because we're in the Anthropocene, like the age of the two-legged humans, impacting the entire globe. It's important to educate our young people and to empower them, and that is the best method, is to develop education that's connected to relationality, their relationships to the land and one another. I think there is the importance of the reality of these political systems that are engraved in these massive corporate capitalist, unsustainable capitalist systems that are just going well. I mean, that's the whole point, is they're going beyond the ability of the earth, Mother Earth, to sustain those economic equations and economic policy, the theories, the economic theories. So it's time to take a step back, start looking at indigenous ways of knowing, indigenous cosmology, indigenous theories of sustainability. And I think that's important. And I think the Western science does have a way, but really the Western science, from because I got my degree in biology, Western science is a deductive means, and it's based on, it's really it takes away from the mind. And the most powerful thing my elders told me is our minds, because our minds give us can change the universe, and that whether that's the universe that we perceive or the universe around us. Or anyways, the point is our minds are very powerful. And so the basics of science that I grew up with was separating that human being, the human mind, from reality in an objective. Everything is subjective to the human mind from an indigenous perspective. So I'm just going deep in philosophy. So strategy is to recognize that our mind is powerful as individuals, and that our traditional ways as indigenous peoples, but maybe it's place-based systems that have provided for food security, because food, there is no sovereignty of any peoples without food, period. And so that's it's important to recognize that. And then sustainable system is our relationality. So I'll keep it at that. I know that we only got a couple minutes left, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl. And Peleke, do you want to share some effective strategies that you've seen or used in the struggle for food sovereignty?
Definitely the realm with Carl, like first and foremost, their relationship with the land, down into the water, take it for granted. The next generation take it for granted. They can just buy it from the store in a water bottle or drink it out of the faucet. Even our faucet is not even that good, but to be able to drink from a spring and know that, well, it's untouched, unfiltered, unpiped, and you can actually taste the difference. You can feel the difference, and to know that that's what our ancestors has been drinking all the time. It's what the land's drinking, like using to be fruitful. It's what the fish needs, or everything the aquifer needs. And yeah, I think we can actually take care, do those little parts of getting the next generation to really take care of those spaces that we have. It's giving those nice fresh waters and keeping it clean and protecting it and not allowing it to be diverted for development and tourism and agriculture and stuff. Because we had systems how to do that and still leave the water in place where growing naturally or flowing naturally. And then the second part is definitely learning the politics of this, jumping in there, because no matter what, we can protect all we can down here on the ground, and they're still flying papers back and forth and getting things pushed through. And then by the time we figure it out, it's already too late, and we're yelling and roaring and whatever, throwing marches and trying to protect places, but on the so-called legal side, it's already been passed through. So stepping in there, seeing where we can start throwing the spokes in the wheels when they start trying to turn, and stopping it from the get-go. And then ultimately, at least for here in Hawaii, it's rewriting the wrong. We like getting that illegal occupation status off of us and trying to get our people up to par so that we can stand up as a nation again and be as fruitful as we were 129 years ago. We push it forward, everybody.
Well, thank you so much to both of you for sharing all of that with us. We're going to go into the Zoom room in just a minute. So for people who are listening, please please get your questions ready, because Carl and Peleke will be there to answer all of them or most of them. And just want to give another thanks to both of you, Peleke and Carl, and also to Carla, who's been like assisting us in the back end, as well as Daniel of Empowered Streaming, and obviously to everyone at Oxford Real Farming Conference. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in the Zoom. Bye.